Well, Dan Perry is the former chairman of the Foreign Press Association of Israel, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Good to have you with us. So we've had 15 aid organizations, including groups like Save the Children, the Norwegian Refugee Council, Christian Aid amongst the 15, saying that the scale of Israeli aid obstruction is, quote, driving a humanitarian disaster. Are they right to be concerned about the siege and the disruption of aid at a time when people are facing a cold, wet winter?
I think they're absolutely right to be concerned, of course. We are clearly witnessing a very major humanitarian drama, probably a catastrophe. That's reasonable to describe it as such. Why it's happening, how to end it, who's to blame is just one of these forever Middle East disputes. And I'm not sure any of us can agree exactly on the narrative that should apply. In Israel, there's a very big debate. Everyone understands, I think, or at least most thinking people understand, that to impede the aid in any way is ethically wrong, has humanitarian implications, has reputational damage for Israel, and also legal complications. All that is indisputable. But on the other hand, Israelis say, how on earth can we continue to send aid into an area that is in a war to the finish with us? They argue, and I think correctly, that the aid is very often hijacked by Hamas, which then sells it on the black market, that drivers are afraid to go in for fear of being attacked, and that in general, the more aid they send in, the longer Hamas is able to hold out.
But clearly, Dan, sorry, I just got to jump in. It's not a never-ending sort of Middle East dispute when it comes to the application of the standards of international law, right? These aid organizations, in fact, the UN Special Committee to investigate Israeli practices on November the 14th stated that through its siege over Gaza, obstruction of humanitarian aid, Israel is intentionally causing death, starvation, serious injury, using starvation as a method of war, and inflicting collective punishment. Now, a lot of countries engage in warfare, but what the UN Special Committee is saying, you don't have a right to violate international law, right?
Yeah, well, look, that's obviously factually true, although starvation, I don't think, is happening on a wide scale, if it on any scale in Gaza. But clearly the suffering is enormous. Clearly. I can't read minds, and neither can the UN Special Committee. Their intent, I strongly doubt, is to cause starvation or death. I've said this many times on your program. Their intent is to get back the hostages and to remove Hamas.
So, Dan, are you really telling the audience that the UN Special Committee is wrong and these aid agencies are wrong?
I'm telling the audience that if the UN committee can read minds in the Israeli government and army, then that is a very neat trick, and it's a scoop unlike any I've ever had in my career in journalism. What I am saying as a person who currently lives in Israel is that I know that not just the government, which is despised by at least half of Israel, but the Israeli public at large wants two things: to get back the hostages and for Hamas to no longer be in a position to attack them from Gaza. And therefore, if one is...
But you don't need to starve a population in order to fight a war, right? And to try and get back hostages.
I'm telling you, I have no evidence they're intentionally trying to starve the population.
Well, that's what...
And indeed, there is no starvation in Gaza.
Well, this is what B'Tselem says. B'Tselem says that narrative is, quote, Israel has stooped so low. This is in a statement of April 2024, saying Israel has stooped so low as to try and present a false image that there was no serious nutritional crisis in Gaza. This is an Israeli human rights group. Are they also...
I think they're obviously...
They're wrong as well.
There obviously is a nutritional problem in Gaza. What I was saying is that I have no evidence of actual starvation. And that is one of the words that appears in the ICC indictment. And by doing that, I think they've given Netanyahu a sort of a defense, because he can claim that there is actually no starvation. This issue is very complex. Humanitarian law can be rather fuzzy, and it doesn't apply well in every situation. Sandy, if I may answer your question, we have here a very, very unusual situation that Israel is dealing with, in which They are trying to finish off a terrorist group that has hijacked an entire population. And aid that goes in is then taken by that terrorist group and sold on the black market. This is not a false accusation. So what to do in that situation if you're Israel is not so clear. Because I repeat, their only goal is to get back the hostages and remove Hamas. And it wouldn't be crazy, Sammy. One sentence here. It wouldn't be crazy if we were to conclude that the way out of this, for the benefit of the Gazans, is to put maximal pressure on Hamas to give up and hand over the hostages, because then the war would be over in a second. And you would cease to be able to say that Israel's intent is to kill or starve anyone, because Israel would be doing nothing. For that to happen, Hamas has to succumb to those two conditions. And it wouldn't be completely absurd for all the good faith players in the region, from Egypt and Saudi Arabia to the UAE and yes, to Qatar, to put every conceivable pressure on Hamas to stop the fight, because that is what is continuing the humanitarian disaster. And I think we all know it.
Dan,
and that is simply the truth.
There wasn't any hostages before October the 7th. There was decades of occupation and what Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and B'Tselem call apartheid, right? You recognize that? So the idea that if we just didn't have the hostages, everything would be fine, is not actually factual, is it? It wasn't fine for the Palestinians.
You know, Sammy, No, I disagree, with respect. And I'm someone who has led the coverage both of South Africa and of Gaza.
You disagree
and of the West
that
Bank.
there was an occupation and an apartheid, according to these organizations?
In West Bank, the organizations can say what they want. I'm only responsible for what I say. Apartheid in South Africa was a racially based separation system. In the West Bank, you have something disgraceful, in my view, but it is not apartheid. It's not racial. Jewish settlers living in territory that isn't even annexed by Israel in a highly bizarre situation are treated as citizens of Israel. The Palestinians aren't, and that's obviously parallel legal systems, and it's wrong, but it is not apartheid. You can claim it has elements of it, and fine. That's one of these never-ending debates. As for Gaza, sorry, since 2005, when Israel pulled out all troops and settlers, I don't qualify it as occupied.
The rest of the world does, though. That's the problem, isn't it, Dan? The rest of the world classified the fact that it
not the entire rest of the world. The United States,
the United Nations, Amnesty International, the Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, 36 UN experts. I mean, that's pretty much a big chunk, if not the rest of the world, right?
Listen,
all right, I mean, that's your perspective. We'll leave it for the audience to judge it there.
Well,
all right. I'm afraid we're out of time. We're going to have to end it there.
It's hard to occupy a territory if you're not present on the ground.
It's hard to have freedom, though, sir, if you're controlling everything else on the borders and in the air and the sea, I think is the point which the international community makes.
That's true, but that was Israel plus Egypt.
We'll have to leave it there. Dan Parry, former chairman
That was Israel plus Egypt, and for reasons that we can discuss next time.
Of the Foreign Press Association. Thank you so much.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.